You're listening to the Sokan Community Podcast. Your favorite source for gaming, film, and internet debate starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the official premiere of Season 4 of the Sokan Podcast. I'm your host, T, and with me are Jace and Leo.
Jace, Drayson!
Hello!
Alright, well, we're very excited to be back for a new season. It's been over 3 years since our last release, but now we're back in action with just a little bit of rebranding. Old listeners can still expect plenty of Star Wars and SWTOR talk, but we'll also be going over a whole lot more. Everything to do with gaming, film, and internet news. So, with that said, how have you guys been? It's been a little while.
3 years. Has it really been 3 years since the last podcast? That's no joke.
I have no idea.
It's hard for me to really believe, but I guess it's right. Because I've been doing Conclave for 2 years, so for 2 years. Jeez Louise. I'm getting old.
In the eyes of the internet, you are the ancient elders.
There's a unique tragedy to that. I'm Leo. I obviously wasn't a part of the podcast before because it was before my time, but I am stoked to be a part of the return of the podcast, and especially stoked to be here with this cool team. But I've been great. We just had our Thanksgiving holiday. Got back from that. Enjoying Cyber Monday today. I'm getting ready to talk about video games.
Did you do some cybering on Cyber Monday? Is that what you were into?
No, Jace, I'm too old for that.
I haven't done any shopping of any kind. Well, that's not true. I bought 4 bottles of oil and vinegar from a local oiler, whatever you call people who make oil, for my aunts for Christmas. Those are the only ones that I've bought. I actually bought 3, but I opened 1 pack for myself.
I really want to ask what that's for, but we do have other topics to talk about for today.
I'm just very interesting. I'll try to keep us on topic.
Okay. Well, today we'll be discussing the upcoming new Star Wars film, The Rise of Skywalker, as well as streaming services that are kind of taking over modern media and subscription-based gaming. So with that said, let's get started. Disney and Lucasfilm recently released a final trailer for Rise of Skywalker, and taking one last look at our friends has really made a lot of us here in Sokan emotional. A lot of fans heavily criticized The Last Jedi for a number of reasons, but mainly that a lot of what was built up in The Force Awakens just wasn't delivered on. Now, with only one movie in the trilogy remaining, do you think that The Rise of Skywalker will be able to really bring us home?
So, Leo and I have a long-standing disagreement about Star Wars, so you can
say that.
This will be a nice off for the tone of the podcast, perhaps. I am a huge Star Wars nerd. I love everything Star Wars to a certain degree. I have high hopes for Rise of Skywalker. I will be the first to admit that I was a little soured on the last movie. It didn't do all the things I wanted it to do, but it was still Star Wars, so I had a good time, and certainly was a beautiful movie. I am very excited for Rise of Skywalker. The final trailer did give me that bring me to tears feeling, and I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to give us a nice send-off. They're going to give us something to round out the saga, make us feel like it's Star Wars again, give us a little, warm fuzzy, and hopefully a good time, and then that'll be it. It'll be over as far as the Skywalkers go. So yes, I think that they will bring us home.
So let me just re-emphasize that long-standing disagreement that Jace and I have on recent Star Wars. I will only say that I am frankly jealous of Jace's optimism, mostly because I just don't share it. A lot of that is my own personal cynicism when it comes to these kinds of things, but really, this comes down to, what do you consider bringing us home? Do you consider it having a satisfying story and conclusion to these characters' lives? I haven't seen that yet, and so I'm not very optimistic about seeing it finalized. We've seen, I think, an attempt made to be rid of the Star Wars of the past, so that a new Star Wars for future generations can be created. And I think the method that's being used to do that is one that is very unsatisfying. And so I'm cynical about it. I'm really not looking forward to it. I'll probably see it because I'm a little bit of a masochist. But yeah, just don't share that optimism.
I think though one of the things that people have to do is be able to let go a little bit. Let go your feelings, if I will, if I may, because the new Star Wars is not the old Star Wars. The satisfying ending to Luke's tale really was Return of the Jedi, and that was something I kind of had to come to terms with. This is a generation or two later within the same saga, so it has to be different, and different doesn't always mean bad. The unsatisfying pieces to me have to do with the fact that I'm expecting something with old characters and not necessarily latching onto the idea that this is about some new characters, and the old characters are really more about giving depth to the universe than they are about carrying narrative. The new kids get to carry the narrative, and I think that my hope is, I anticipate that The Rise of Skywalker will do that, will allow those new characters to really push us home, push us through to a feeling of completion, a galactic completion. Wow, that sounded a little risque.
I mean, yes, I do think there will be some kind of galactic completion when everything is said and done. And I do agree that there was a pretty solid wrap-up for the initial trilogy. And this is 4 new characters. This is, a different story. But I guess what I'm hoping for is kind of not necessarily an homage, but certainly a story that honors those previous characters. And I just don't feel that with the current saga. I'm seeing more of a, hey, let's toss these old characters, and hopefully by making them old and washed up and bitter and really awful, then the characters we have now are going to look better as a result of it, and everybody's going to prefer these guys. And I just see that continuing.
Well, in that case, speaking of the old characters returning and maybe feeling a little thrown in the trailers now we see that Palpatine will actually be making a return. We've seen him as a senator, we've seen him as a Sith Lord. In what form do you think he's going to come back this time?
There's not a whole lot of options. I mean, there's certainly fan theories. I try to stay away from fan theories. I try to stay away from leaks and spoilers and stuff like that, because I really enjoy experiencing movie and the story for the first time when I see the thing. So I don't know what the ideas are that are out there. My idea would be certainly that maybe perhaps there's a clone. We know that Palpatine was instrumental in creating the clone army. It would make sense then that perhaps he followed up on the studies of Pelagius and learned how to carry on in life, to defeat death and keep himself viable in some type of clone form, or allow his Force ghost to jump into another iteration of himself, or even survive the fall in Death Star 2 and somehow have a cobbled together body. Vader's body was ravaged, but he was saved through cybernetics. Grievous was ravaged and saved through cybernetics. Maul ravaged and saved through cybernetics. So it could be also, the original Palpatine, just cybernetically saved or enhanced or preserved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to have Palpatine back, as you express. I mean, we've seen pretty important and critical characters come back in crazy ways. I mean, Maul was cut in half, and the dude survived.
'Tis but a scratch.
So yeah, I mean, Palpatine is supposed to be, he's a, if not the strongest, one of the strongest Force users in the universe. So I don't think that's beyond his power to survive, if he had the will to do so. So I've heard some of the theories about, he's not that he's a clone, but that the version of him that died in the original trilogy was a clone. I don't know. I don't know if that's if it's necessary to go into that kind of detail with a story like this. The idea of the Force being, a mystical, magical power that allows space wizards to go around doing their thing, I think can certainly allow somebody as powerful as Palpatine to survive that kind of stuff. So I think it's reasonable.
Another character in that we've had a lot of theories about and uncertainty towards. Do you think that Palpatine is going to have any connection to Rey, as many people have theorized?
I don't read the theories, I just say it. If you go back and listen to some of the podcasts prior to The Force Awakens, I think that I probably dreamed and spouted off about Rey and who she might be. This was before any of us knew. This was before the first sequel movie released. I'm hesitant to take guesses on some of this stuff because of how absolutely wrong I was. Well, I assume we still don't absolutely know who Rey is. There seems to be hints in the trailer that perhaps this coming together of Rey and Kylo is planned by the Emperor from way back in the day. So there's perhaps some type of connection in that way. It could be, but I don't know. Ultimately, the tie to me is less about Rey and really more about some sort of ultimate goal of the Emperor. From episode 1 and through episode 6, the Emperor was, or Chief Palpatine was instrumental in plotting, in creating this like deep conspiracy to get to some goal. We really don't know what that goal was. I mean, we saw where he was going. He created the Empire. I don't think that the Empire was the end. There was another something. So I'm thinking maybe this is gonna teach us what that was.
So I think Palpatine's connection to Rey. So the Star Wars in general has a very strong lineage system. So there's a whole lot of emphasis placed on who your forebears were in just about every important family in the Star Wars universe, and I think that this will be no exception. I think we don't know who Rey's parents were. We don't know where she came from, and I think there's a really good chance that Palpatine is it. Granted, I'm the opposite of Jace, and I do read a lot of theorizing because I just can't help myself. But it follows what I think is kind of the Star Wars track of just making those familial connections so important, and the fact that we have this blank spot in Rey's past, and then we have Palpatine making a comeback. I think that's not a coincidence, and I think those two are going to be linked in a familial way.
Talking about family, the last of our original trilogy family, final survivor is Leia. J.J. Abrams has described her as the heart of the rise of Skywalker, yet most sources claim that she's not CGI'd into the film. Given Carrie Fisher's untimely passing, how much do you think we're going to be able to see of her in this?
So I think this was probably one of the most significant challenges that any of the folks who worked on the movie or even the trilogy had to face. She, I think, has always meant to be instrumental, or was always meant to be instrumental, and it was obviously tragic and also very unfortunate. Her passing before this movie was finished. I think she played an important role in Kylo's redemption arc, or his potential redemption arc. Leia is the one he can't bring himself to kill, even though, I mean, he skewered his dad. But Leia, he can't bring himself to do it. So I think she's going to play a very important role in that aspect, in Kylo's, I think, redemption arc. And could potentially be a tutor, a trainer for Rey that she wanted with Luke and got a taste of with Luke, and may actually experience something more significant.
There is another. So I'm I'm kind of torn on this piece of the puzzle, simply because Carrie Fisher's passing was so unforeseen and out of the blue, and I'm sure that it did actually put a big dent in the overall plan. I don't know if what we're hearing from JJ is kind of making lemonade out of lemons and trying to say that, you know, she's the heart because the actress passed, and so we're going to try to make her the heart of it, or if actually it works. As somebody who has worked with story in the past, so one thing that's pretty out there is that they said they use a lot of the footage of Carrie Fisher from previous films to flesh out this the story in Rise of Skywalker. I think that's really hard when you have set lines and set production that you then have to massage into a real meaningful story. So the challenge, I'm sure, is just massive. My concern is that the director saying that she's the heart of the Rise of Skywalker is kind of seeding that in us, so that when we get there, we already have that expectation, and then we can kind of be led by the nose a little bit. Personally, I am a little worried about taking old footage and building a story around it. I will be honest.
I mean, I admit they hooked me with it because it's something I'm interested in seeing, and I am curious how much of that old footage really would fit. I'd like to see it.
And as you can clearly tell, listening to all of us get a little choked up just talking about her, Carrie Fisher was definitely very dear to all of us and all of the fans.
So I'll just throw this out there. There's this one reaction video on the interwebs for the final trailer, and there's this like dude. I don't want to call him a nerd, but he's a nerd, but mostly because I'm a nerd with him. And he's reacting to the trailer first time, right? And it gets to the end there with Leia saying the final line in the trailer, and he just comes apart. And I felt that on a spiritual level with that man. So. Yeah, she's pretty important. Obviously, Carrie Fisher was vitally important to the franchise and really set the tone for a lot of our childhood in many ways.
Yeah, totally. On this Star Wars point, we agree.
Dun dun dun.
With the Skywalker saga coming to an end soon, never fear, we do have plenty of Star Wars content, with The Mandalorian currently showing, the standalone Kenobi series coming soon, and a potential Old Republic trilogy in the works. What do you guys want to see in the next Star Wars lineup?
Easy. I don't want to say I'm disappointed. Rogue One was not what I expected. I actually really liked Rogue One. It was a good movie, but what I was expecting was Rogue Squadron, and I didn't get Rogue Squadron, and I want a Rogue Squadron type series. I don't want a movie series. I want a television series of a group of pilots who, and they can set it. It doesn't really matter to me a whole lot in what era they set it, but I want that feeling of like camaraderie and kind of like a band of brothers in Star Wars. That would be so BA to have, space battles, and I kind of want Civil War era just because X-Wings are my fave. They have X-Wings now too. Poe Dameron's pretty good on X-Wing, I'll admit it. But I would love Rogue Squadron story.
I think that would be pretty cool. Those kinds of stories really are fun to watch. Honestly, so Rogue One I thought was a cool movie. Solo I thought wasn't a bad movie either. The box office numbers were a little disappointing, especially because I thought it was not bad. And I am really digging The Mandalorian, and I think the reason that I like these movies and shows so much is because they are about normal people in this insane universe that has space wizards. And how do normal people, how do they get along in a universe like this? I think those have some of the most interesting and compelling storytelling elements to them. There's so much that those just normal people in the universe have to overcome. The forces, allayed against them. How do they succeed? How do they even survive? That to me makes for cool stories. And those are characters that are, in my opinion, a little bit more relatable. Like Luke Skywalker was an awesome character. He was one, to look up to, at least in the original trilogy. But he's a Force user, will never be a space wizard. These normal folks, we can see ourselves in.
Like moisture farmers. You just want a series about moisture farming?
I mean,
But
if
it could be like a soap opera like Dallas, but
if
it's
they have
about
to
moisture.
face off against wizards, yeah, I'd watch that.
Yeah.
The Real
Okay.
Housewives of a Galaxy Far, Far Away.
Yeah.
Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker premieres on December 20th, and you can bet your buttons we're going to be talking about it again afterwards. With the release of Disney Plus, yet another streaming service has made it onto our dockets. Between Disney, Hulu, Netflix, and a whole bunch of others, all with their own different acronyms and various attachments, cable subscriptions have been going down, streaming subscriptions have been going up, and pirating has made its way back onto the field. Do you think it's more cost effective to pay for multiple streaming services than it was to pay for cable television?
So I think with your final note there that piracy is making a comeback, absolutely. If you know what I mean.
He's saying he's stealing. Did y'all get that?
I would never say that. But actually, no. I think if you're careful about what it is that you're paying for, I do think it can be way more cost effective because you're tuned into the things that you actually want to watch. I can't tell you how many cable channels I'm just not interested in, and they just come with a package. This way, I get to be a little bit more decisive about what it is that I'm paying for, and I can reduce my cost by simply not signing up for streaming services that I'm not interested in. I think it's way more cost effective.
It's I'm not an economist, so it's hard for me to talk about cost effectiveness. I can tell you for sure that in my house, I'm paying a whole lot more. With every streaming service that comes about, I find myself adding more and more to my recurring bill category on my budget. Part of that is because I am a little bit of a entertainment hog and I want to see all the things, so I have my CBS All Access and I have my DC Universe and I have my Disney Plus. I like that kind of stuff, but at the same time I don't have cable, but I do have satellite, and the satellite bill is quite expensive. And you know, when it comes to the channels that come with my satellite, or when it comes with the channels that come with cable, no, I'm not watching the vast majority of them, but I'm also not watching the vast majority of stuff on, say, Netflix. There's a lot of stuff on there that's just not good, or in a language I don't understand and I refuse to read my TV. So it's just, it depends. How do you say cost effective? If you're spending more, then no, it is not cost effective. You have to be disciplined to know, I do want to watch this, I will not watch that, I'm cutting the cable, I'm tearing the dish off my roof. Whatever it is you do, cost effective is really more about budgeting than it is about what it is you're paying for. Ultimately, if we keep going the way we're going, every network, every producer, every studio, everybody's going to have their own streaming service, and if they're all charging, premium prices, it's not going to be cost effective. We're going to be paying a lot more money to get the full spread of entertainment. It's kind of a weird time to be in TV type entertainment because of what's happening with streaming services. So I don't necessarily think it's more cost effective. You can make it cheaper. You can certainly make it cheaper, yes. But what are you getting for that cheapness? I don't know.
So with that in mind, cable channels, again, creating their own streaming services to help compete with the new markets. Do you think cable will evolve into streaming-centric mediums entirely? Or is cable television just not done?
I don't know. It's a really hard thing to predict. I think we have enough examples of businesses or companies being unwilling to adapt to new market and the new in that I'm hoping these executives at these companies have learned from, let's say, Blockbuster's lesson, and will adapt to provide what it is people are looking for. I think cable television will eventually die out. Because those who are not offering what people want are simply not going to have customers. And it's going to be a do or die situation for them. So, I mean, obviously those who do evolve will stick around and those who don't won't.
The fact is, internet is a better utility. You can do more things with internet than you can with your cable or with your satellite. Your cable line that comes in is just about good for cable. Your satellite that comes in is just about good for satellite. You're not going to get more than that. So certainly you can do a little bit of pay-per-viewing or some streaming sort of through that, but the internet you can do everything with. You've got your banking, your gaming, your TV, your movies, everything's coming into the internet. Eventually, I do feel like that portal is going to be the primary means by which all communication and media is happening in our homes. So it is sort of a situation of get on board or get out of town. One of the interesting things in my town is my cable network is also my internet provider. So some cable companies are obviously, well, I would say most cable companies are to that point where they want to bundle you, or they're providing that service as well. So they won't necessarily die out, but they are going to change. In fact, I would say that they already have changed, and perhaps the television bit of it is going to continue to be choked off. There's old people, older people than me who cling to older technologies, but those people go away eventually to a place in the sky that I'll call nirvana. And technology progresses. That's just the way it is. It's happening with a lot of different mediums, but I think it's going to happen with cable television as well.
I mean, it's going to go the way of like the home phone. I mean, I have I have parents, grandparents. They still have a home phone,
Yeah.
and I don't. I haven't.
No, it's absolutely true.
And yeah, it's going to go the same direction.
I operate a call list at my agency. We have 65 employees right now. On our call list, there are 5 people out of our 65 who still have a home number. That's a remarkable jump from what I would guess is a decade or 2 decades ago.
Sending cable television out to the farm. Interesting.
Where it belongs.
Where's Old Yeller?
So with television on its way out to the farm, out to retirement, how do you think that that's going to affect public access, which could be anything from channels like PBS or news-centric events like the moon landing? With people having to pay for access to news sites and news articles online, are we as a society going to just start to disconnect from those events by only reading about it or choosing specific producers of content that we're going to follow along with? Or do you think that news streaming and the 24-hour news cycle are going to find a way to adapt?
They will find a way to adapt. It will happen. The 24-hour news cycle is an adaptation, quite frankly. News was not delivered in this way for all time. News, the way that we get our news changes all the time. And it will continue to change. It's a very strange time that we live in. The problem is that people are choosing places to get their news that they already agree with in a lot of instances. So news is a little bit less newsy and more entertainment-y. That's a little bit of my own personal soapbox, perhaps. But I think that the trend will continue that way. And people will get news the way that they eat at the cafeteria, and they'll pick the places where they go to get it. The days of the moon landing where everyone sits around the TV and watches this momentous event, I think that is over with. People are catching those types of things on Twitter or on their Facebook feeds. Certainly some streaming news services are successful, and I use them on occasion myself. When something newsworthy has happened, I'll have it streaming at the office, but it's through my computer anyway. Broadcast is just going to be totally different, and news will have to jump on board as it has been having to change over the years.
Totes, I was watching a really tear-jerky kind of biography of Mr. Rogers and his whole Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood experience, the however long he was on the air, and it was really interesting to watch the evolution of the challenges he faced on the show, and even just the changes the show went through. It went from black and white to color before it went off the air, and I think this is just another step in that in that evolution of what kinds of challenges do these kinds of public access or news venues face. I think, like Jace had mentioned earlier, the internet is where people are finding their access to these kinds of things. I also agree. Man, I find myself agreeing with you a lot. This is terrible.
I'm a brilliant person.
I also agree people tend to find the areas that they already agree with, and that's where they get their sources. However, things like the moon landing aren't really an opinion piece. And I do see people are going to discover, or they're going to learn about, the next moon landing on their phone. It's not going to be something that they sit around a TV or a radio, like back in the day, in their living rooms with their families about. It's not a worse way. I, in fact, think it's kind of a better way because you get more immediate access to that kind of stuff. And I think the proliferation of information through the internet has been a wonderful thing. It's allowed us to find stuff out. I can Google anything, anywhere, if I want to know whether a platypus lays eggs or not. I can find that out right now.
You're nasty.
Spoiler alert, they do. With the rise of just so many streaming services, all of these coming up within just a handful of years, do you think that this is ultimately going to encourage more pirating? And do you think that we'll actually start having pirated news sites as well?
I mean, I think with any increase in technology or the increase in the reliance on a particular technology, people are going to find out how to pirate it. I think we'll see a surge of it, but I think there will come behind it means of quelling that piracy. That does tend to be the trend we've seen with. I remember when Napster was like a legit free music site.
Yeah.
And then all kinds of
LimeWire.
stuff changed. And I think that we'll see the same thing here.
You know, play is going to play and pirate's going to pirate. It's just human nature that they're going to get things in a way that is less expensive. Sometimes we call it stealing. Yes, technology will continue to combat that, but technology will continue to fall behind the ingenuity of people that want to get a free Sammy. Yeah, it'll encourage pirating for sure.
Whether you've got 12 streaming platforms or none, the popularity of such services with both producers and markets has been undeniable, and we're just going to have to wait and see how the film industry ends up evolving to match it. So, subscription-based gaming is definitely something that we are no stranger to as MMO players. We're usually just debating over like what should and shouldn't be sublocked, but the existence of a paywall has generally been a fact of life for a while now. Still, it's surprising to see even companies known for their single-player RPGs taking steps towards subscription gaming, like Bethesda and their upcoming title Fallout First. With everyone from lawyers to internet trolls actively taking down the loot box gaming setup, is Bethesda jumping on a sinking ship with this plan, or do you think there's a chance it might pan out for them?
So you're absolutely right. We are not strangers to subscription-based gaming, as soon as I can pronounce those words. And I have to say, having seen the difference between what a subscription-based game produces versus what any of these other methods of farming money from players produces, I will take subscription-based gaming any day. I think it has a lot of really solid qualities to it. Whether or not it's a sinking ship, I don't know. I think it has the potential to remain a viable and competitive vehicle for, obviously, profit for companies who are developing these games, if they're able to implement it properly. What people are looking for when they pay a subscription is constantly evolving content. They want more content because you're paying ultimately for that, and also a barrier to entry for folks who aren't really interested in playing the game, for trolls and for griefers and for bots. Like, I don't want them in my game. So I think as long as it can be done right, it's a brilliant system, and I want to see more of it.
I think the rub there is in be done right, and the big fat problem with all of that is that the majority of the time the MMOs that have subscription base to them are not really done right, especially in the instance that Lovely Matea has brought forward to us. I'm not sure if you've heard much about Fallout 76, but it was not a popular game. It did not please the fan base. So when you've got a game that really didn't, let's say, shoot the moon, and then you tack on a monthly subscription behind the fact and promise, oh yeah, but we're going to get better. What I'm smelling here is rat. Yes, if you give me something great, I don't mind paying for it. But what I don't like is the fact that it feels like I'm being milked. I don't want to be milked. I don't want to pay a monthly fee for something that is ultimately not going to satisfy. And I think that in regard to the question, in regard to the conversation, this is kind of like paying to get on the Titanic. It does feel like you already know where this game's going because it's basically Fallout 76, and then it hasn't been popular, it hasn't been pleasing to the fan base, and now they're promising more, but you're going to have to pay a lot more, and you're going to have to keep paying a lot more, and it has garnered a lot of really harsh criticism in this case. I also do feel just in general that the MMO genre, or the subscription-based MMO genre, is probably phasing out. We don't see those AAA MMOs coming out anymore. There's not as many on the horizon, whereas 5-10 years ago, we were hitting multiple MMOs a year. Many of them did not make it. Many of them were what we call crapola in the business. But the model doesn't seem to be a successful model by and large. It seems to be niche successful.
Yeah, however, I think even with the lack of success we've seen a lot of those MMOs produce, I mean, look at WoW. WoW is a hugely popular MMO. In fact, it's so popular that it popularized it to normies. Like, normies know what WoW is because it's so huge and so successful. And it's a subscription model. Like you had said, if it's done well, I do think it can be successful. And I think it not only is successful, but it paints the picture for what success looks like for these potential games. I think the market is settling itself. I do think we had way too many MMOs 10-15 years ago. I don't think that was sustainable. I think they were busy eating each other alive for players, and I think a lot of players were playing 2 or 3 MMOs at a time, and I know as an MMO player, I don't like to do that. And I think there's a lot of other folks who, if they're going to commit to a game, especially if they're going to pay a subscription, they're going to do one MMO. And now that I think that the field has kind of been leveled, we've lost, kind of the worst MMOs out there. I do think it's a much better, it's a much better world for subscription-based MMOs and subscription-based games in general. Can we just take a moment to notice that you called non-gamers normies, like muggles?
Muggles. I just want to pause there and point that out, that the normies are on board with paying our subscription prices.
But I mean, they know what WoW is. My parents know what WoW is, and they don't know what most games are.
But I think that WoW is a phenomenon, and it was a phenomenon pretty much from day one. I don't think that you can point at a phenomenon and say that's the way to run a business. A lot of people tried, a lot of companies tried, and more failed than didn't. So I don't know that really the model is viable long term. It's viable for Blizzard in WoW. It's viable for a select few, but I think that subscription-based gaming, by and large, is, at least for the MMO market in this specific conversation, is being phased out. We are seeing the sunset of that type of gaming experience.
I don't like your cynicism, Jace.
What? I'm the cynic now?
There are other ways to put up paywalls besides subscription-based gaming. Like mobile games will charge you to avoid advertisements, and at this point, we've seen even Prime and AAA titles that have been released with unfinished aspects that will be paid for later in DLC expansions. Do you think that bigger titles are going to continue in this direction? Like, especially if Fallout First does well, but not even specifically MMOs, just titles in general.
Fallout First is not going to go well. I'm going to go on record and just say that. However, companies are going to try to make money. That's what they do. Other titles are going to try to find ways to nickel and dime more money out of us. It is not in any way a new practice. I believe we've talked about it at some point in the past on remember Oblivion and the horse DLC that came out. It was
The
just
horse
armor for your
armor?
horse.
Yeah.
And it was like $2 or $3. I don't really remember exactly, but and that was just for armor and your horse, a cosmetic in a single player game that truly no one else but you at your computer will see. I mean, you could literally just imagine it or cut it out of cardboard and put it over your screen if you wanted to dress up your horse. I'm not saying people don't pay for that. I have been one to be known to pay for beautiful things inside games. But my point is, if there is a way to get more gems, jewels, diamonds out of us, a company is going to try it. So yeah, they're going to continue.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to continue, but I do think that the market is going to correct those egregious efforts, at least the most egregious efforts. We've seen, so loot boxes have been one of those things that, it's been, they're crazy popular with producers, and not so much with the players. And we've seen the repercussions of those games that I think tend to go overboard with loot boxes, to the point where there are even potential legal consequences where we're calling it gambling and whatnot. I think those means of garnering a profit they're going to wash out. We're going to see attempts made, we're going to see some succeed, and we're going to see some fail. This is why I think subscription-based gaming is the way to go, because it isn't subject to a lot of these other issues. You see pay-to-win games. You see like mobile games that make you pay to avoid advertisements. That makes me cringe. But people pay them, and I don't get how they have managed to stick around for so long. However, for good games, I'd be willing to pay a subscription fee. I'm not willing to pay any money to get advertisements taken off of a mobile game. That's gross.
Are you willing to pay extra real dollars to buy other cosmetic things in games above and beyond your subscription?
I am, and I have.
I too have as well. That's part of what I'm saying. I think that it doesn't end with the MMO subscription fee. It doesn't stop there. If as you say, the market will correct itself. I hope that it happens quickly, and I do think that we are in that correction when it comes to MMOs in this actual period. I don't think that we're going to see...
while we're still alive?
Yeah, well, not just while we're still alive. You and I don't have that many more years ahead of us, let's be honest. But I mean, in this particular moment in history, we are seeing the decline of the MMO, the subscription-based MMO, I think. They're going to find another way to nickel and dime us, but I don't know that it's going to look like it looks now.
Well, I think we're seeing a decline in some of their popularity here in the West, but I think elsewhere they're great. I mean, they're hopping. And I'm not sure we're really seeing a genuine decline here in the West. We're seeing less MMOs, but do we see fewer people playing MMOs? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the answer to that. I think people are just playing fewer MMOs themselves, but that number is greater than zero.
We'll need to do some research.
Side note, Leo, with the normies and now mobile gamers, is there anyone else you'd like to call out?
I think I'm at my quota.
Alright. But speaking of pushback, especially with the loot boxes, because you mentioned that a minute ago. Do you think that the gaming industry is going to face pushback, if not comparable to that, in the same vein against the idea of these additional subscription games, even if it's for single player or for the additions of DLC? We've complained about it, sure, but do you think there's actually going to be significant pushback?
Let's take a moment to I hope eventually on the podcast we will be speaking about a game that I have come to love called Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. EA is one of the most egregious offenders when it comes to nickel and diming, finding ways to charge us. If you are not aware, Jedi Fallen Order is a game that you pay for, you buy it, and then you play it, and there's not another way to spend money in that game. I'm not saying that there never will be. I'm not saying they may not put out a DLC, but I think that it is a direct response or a direct reaction, a direct response to perhaps the previous Star Wars game that came out. What was it, Battlefront 2, that had all that loot box controversy and people just griped up and down the internet. There has already been a response to the pushback, in my opinion, and this AAA title, which is actually a really good game, is sort of the answer, or at least a piece of the answer.
Yeah, but EA though, I mean,
I know.
oof.
I know.
So I think I'm not sure EA has learned these lessons. I think EA has put out a game that they're waiting for people to enjoy, and then they're gonna start dropping that stuff in again. It's
The
just
old
what they
bait
do.
and switch.
I think so. Here, let me be the cynic again. But I do think the gaming industry is going to face pushback from these kinds of things, but I don't know if it's going to depend on the company whether or not they adapt to that pushback, and the I guess the means by which they adapt. I think let me use an analogy from an industry that I know well, the financial industry. There was a couple of years ago a huge deal when it was a bank that shall not be named, but they were going to charge $5 for somebody to have a debit card, and people lost their minds. This was awful. It was the worst thing they'd ever heard, and they were going to boycott this particular financial industry. And then this financial industry said, okay, well, we're gonna do away with that $5 fee, and everyone was like, we win. And all that happened is they found another way to charge those people $5 in an area they weren't paying any attention to, because nobody pays attention to their financial statements and the kinds of ways that some of the larger banks are gouging them. And I think a lot of these particularly large titles, I think that's how they're going to handle these kinds of things too. If there's a genuine attempt to address concerns of players, I don't think these other kinds of paywalls are the genuine solution. I think it's subscriptions.
If you're a subscriber to Fallout First, let us know how you feel about it on Twitter by using the hashtag Sokan Podcast. Alright everyone, to close us off today, we have a brand new segment that we like to call Tea Time, in which we take a question submitted by you, our listeners. This could be anything from opinions on an upcoming or recent movie or TV show, a would you rather, or a hypothetical. Just have fun with it. For our very first Tea Time question, we have one from our producer Sil. Because Thanksgiving was just last week, what is the absolute best side dish for Thanksgiving dinner?
Oh man, how to decide?
No, easy for me. It is gonna have to be cheesy broccoli and rice casserole. It's my all-time fave. I mean, and I like it with the cheese whiz and the condensed cream of mushroom soup, just the old-fashioned way with nice and bubbly freaking ricey cheese goodness.
You're a man of culture, I see. I have to go with, I was trying to think what was my favorite thing on my plate, and okay, we had these mashed potatoes, and in those mashed potatoes there was a little bit of ranch, there was a little bit of butter, and it had just the nice brown gravy. And I think because it's forbidden, because I'm a middle-aged metabolism guy, and I'm not supposed to be eating that stuff, that only made it the forbidden fruit, and so much better.
I feel like this should have been a debate topic. I don't understand. You can get mashed potatoes and gravy at literally Church's Chicken. I don't know how it's going to be your favorite Thanksgiving.
It's not my mom's.
My family doesn't do mashed potatoes and gravy for Thanksgiving because it's so not special. And I'm going to double call you out here because did you say ranch in potato?
I did, and I don't like your judging tone.
Like ranch dressing? Like put aside
No,
a
like
ranch
the ranch powder. Like, you know, you make ranch at home with milk mayonnaise and like the ranch powder. You can add a little bit of the powder to mashed potatoes. Are we living in the same
I don't
country?
know that. No. I mean, I know the powder that you're talking about, but I don't know it in my mashed potatoes.
It's fantastic. You should try it. You should open your mind a little bit, Jace. I can't believe how closed you are right now.
You're making Julia Child roll over in her grave right now.
You know, I was about
Martha
to say
Stewart's
something,
head just
like,
exploded.
your broccoli
Rachel Ray
cheese
is
thing
bleeding
sounded
out
good,
of her eyes.
but I take it back. It sounds awful. It sounds gross. You said cheese whiz? Gross.
Cheese whiz in the jar, and you put it in the microwave to get it loose before you pour it in the casserole.
No, you keep that. You keep that gross thing on your plate, and I'm gonna eat my delicious mashed potatoes and gravy.
Well, I'm going to have it besides Thanksgiving. I'm going to pick up some on the way home after this at the Church's Chicken at KFC, and I'm going to have Thanksgiving mashed potatoes.
If you'd like to submit a tea time question for the podcast, head on over to sokangaming.com/sokanmedia and find the submission bar on the right side of the page. All you need to do is make an engine account. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to the premiere of Season 4 of the Sokan Podcast. For more Sokan Media, visit us at sokangaming.com/sokanmedia, follow our Twitter at SokanGaming, and subscribe to our YouTube, Sokan Gaming Community. And you can look for future episodes of the podcast on Google Podcasts and iTunes. Until next time, I've been T.
I'm still Jace Drayson!
I'm also still Leo.
We'll see you next week.
Stay classy, Sokan.
Thank you for listening to the Sokan Community Podcast. Craving more? Visit us on Twitter and YouTube at Sokan Gaming, as well as our website, www.sokangaming.com. Until next time, stay classy. Right, Jace?